This is WTVS, Channel 56, Detroit.
Adolescence. It's a transition from childhood to adulthood, from dependence to responsibility. In the adolescent years, we see the young person mature physically, socially, intellectually, and morally. Adolescence is a time of growth, change, and development.
People expect more of you. And I think that'll just keep getting worse, I guess.
People still ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have different ideals now than you did back then.
A lot of people, their personalities sort of change, and people who you thought you knew really well, all of a sudden, they just change so much.
In some ways, it can be scary when you're growing up, because all these different things are happening to you, and all at once, it can be scary. But in other ways, it's fun because you have more privileges, and younger people always look up to you, and it can be fun.
Eat chocolate, you get zits. Eat hamburgers or french fries, you get zits. I mean, it's a pain.
Well, adolescence is a stage during which we're trying to figure out who we are and what we want and where we're going in life. Of course, there's accompanying physical development, which has a big impact on that. We are developing morally and intellectually and physically, as well as socially and interpersonally. In our society, adolescence begins and ends sometime between the ages of 10 and 20. And early adolescence is that initial difficult stage where you're beginning to feel different. When you look at the research, you find at the age of 14 is when you're most likely to have conflict with your parents, with both father and mother.
If you stand in the hallway, you'll feel the place just has kind of an electricity all the time. By the time they get to high school, it's much calmer. But this age, it just seems like the building's almost shaking sometimes with all the energy. What we know about kids this age is that they're growing tremendously. Their bodies physically are growing, and over the 3 years that we see them from 6th to 8th grade, they just grow a tremendous amount. But their emotions are going kind of haywire during that time, too, so they're typically kind of up and down a lot of what we call volcanic eruptions. They just, you never know what to expect from them. And just when you think you've got it, then they'll throw you off again. And so typically people who work at this age have to be able to kind of roll with it and to understand kids' emotions and hormones. It's hard for kids to be this age.
Biologically, the metamorphosis to adulthood begins with puberty, when the body starts to mature sexually.
Puberty may begin sometime between roughly 11 and 13, somewhat differently for boys and girls. Girls' onset of pubertal development comes earlier. Pubertal development refers to the sexual maturing of the young person toward the end point in the normal course of development of being capable of sexual reproduction. But sexual reproduction is not the only issue. Pubertal development also means a tremendous change in the size and shape of the young person's body. The height spurt in boys is normally about 2 years later than that in girls, and one of the consequences is the well-known discrepancy in height between young teenage boys and girls, something that makes everybody miserably uncomfortable.
Of course, for some adolescents, they wake up in the morning and it appears to them that they look very different than they did the day before. Puberty come on very quickly, and there can be physical changes that occur very quickly, and that, of course, can be very difficult for the adolescent.
Well,
I'm 12. I'm going to be 13 in a month. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like different because everyone always thinks I'm older than I am, you know, because I'm already adopted my own style.
But it changed her self-image almost completely because men started seeing her differently. I mean, boys were looking at her, and she was being treated differently by her girlfriends. And she went almost overnight into wearing almost exclusively black clothes and baggy things to hide the figure that was emerging.
They're looking at a somewhat different person in the mirror, and they may not be emotionally or intellectually ready to deal with that person. And of course, socially, they are expected to behave in the way that they look. So if they are physically mature, they're expected to be socially mature and intellectually mature. You can see one boy who has not even started his puberty period yet, and one boy who has started and completed it, standing side by side quite frequently. Friends will experience that kind of difference when they look around and they see that everyone else is developing physically and have reached their physical peak, and they haven't even started. And that's disconcerting for them, and it is intimidating.
As a part of biological development, adolescents also develop sexually. Sexual attitudes and behavior become central issues for adolescents and adults alike.
It is strange to watch your daughters grow up. I mean, in my case, one of them, the younger one, as it turns out, became taller than I am at quite an early age. And again, you look at them as different human beings as you see them grow up. But that's fun, too. Oh, God.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are starting to, like, get sexually involved with their boyfriends and stuff, because most of my friends like older guys who are, like, around 19 or 20, you know, anywhere from 16 to that. And, you know, I guess they just want more from a relationship than, you know, a walk in the park, so.
A fear for many parents who have females is that they're going to be sexually active early. And we know that, of course, adolescents are more sexually active much earlier now than they were even 15 years ago. And so the likelihood is much greater than it was even then. When you have 1 out of 10 adolescent females getting pregnant, it's a little frightening.
My daughter said the other day that I just shouldn't worry about her, and at any point in time, she knows where she is and she knows that she's okay. But I don't necessarily know that, and it's her prerogative to be independent, have more freedom, and it's my prerogative to worry a little bit, so.
If we're going out on a date or going to a party, you know, we just want to be left alone, and we want to have fun when we go out. We don't want to have to worry about what our parents are thinking, or, you know, or
so what advice would you give your parents then, Lisa, or any parent about that?
Don't be so overprotective, I guess. Try to let go. I mean, I can't always be their little girl.
During adolescence, a person becomes his or her own person. The emerging ability of teens to think and reason for themselves often leads to conflict with adults over independence and autonomy.
It's hard to be a parent of a young adolescent because parents don't understand that part of the thing that kids are going through is a power struggle. And that's normal as part of development. And so they need to exert their independence, but they also need to be dependent on mom some. And parents don't know how to play that because they want to be close to their kids, but they want to let them go to the movies with their friends. So there is a constant struggle between when to be independent and when not, and there's going to be constant disagreements as kids exert their independence.
As an individual, one of the main tasks of adolescence is to individuate or become one's own person.
We're teaching her the game. She don't know much about the game.
Yes, I do.
What do you know about the game?
An American
Current research would indicate that the best sort of garden for growing a healthy adolescent is a warm and supportive family, not a detached one, a warm and supportive family that does, however, acknowledge the adolescent's greater ability to make his or her own decisions, to think through things on his or her own.
You know where you're supposed to start?
Look, Dad,
Hey.
nothing is falling. Look, Dad. Look, hello.
I think that's nice. I admire a good fence painter.
One complaint that we often hear from parents is that their youngsters are so self-absorbed, so egocentric.
She seems really egocentric most of the time to me. She doesn't think of anyone else when she makes decisions about what she's going to do or what she's going to want.
I really like to please myself, actually. I know it's really selfish. I mean, I try to please my mom and my teachers, but, you know, it's really hard and stuff, and I can't always do that.
It's really very reasonable, isn't it, that a young person who is changing so dramatically in so many ways should need to spend a good deal of time thinking about what in the world is happening and trying to make some sense of these extraordinary bodily, interpersonal, and social changes. Self-absorption, to a degree at least, is a healthy impulse.
This is the matinee. This is the opening night, honey.
Because they're young and they're very concerned with their own bodies and all the changes and those things happening and the changes in their emotions and feelings as well as the physical changes, they make a characteristic error, which is to assume that other people are thinking about what they're thinking about, namely themselves. And I call that the imaginary audience, this belief that other people are thinking about you, watching you, concerned with your behavior and actions and so on. And that has a tendency to make young adolescents rather self-conscious because they're always watching them and concerned with them, and why it's so embarrassing when a teacher calls them up to class or something because they really feel, or someone says something negative and they feel this excruciating pain because they see this audience all around them.
Right there.
So this booth line, okay?
Yeah. Turns out it's funny again.
The audience is very characteristic in early adolescence. It can be very positive, can be negative, and we carry it with us throughout our lives, but it's never as prominent as it is in early adolescence.
Perhaps the most reassuring thing I can say is that the imaginary audience eventually leaves the auditorium of life. It just goes away. Kids do outgrow it. This is part and parcel of the course of adolescence. It's a reflection of, and it's a projection of, youngsters' own heightened degree of concern about themselves.
The peer group strongly influences a young person's values. Friends can both provide emotional support and encouragement and put on pressure to conform or violate personal standards.
What has happened since the turn of the century is that young people, teenagers, spend more and more time with other teenagers, so that their central and primary group shifts from being the family to other adolescents.
The question now is to whom do you go to solve the problem? And we've put up around the room some different kinds of people. So if you're the person who doesn't go to anybody else for solutions, you just look within yourself, then you're going to walk over here in a moment to the sign that says myself. If you're the kind of person that most of the time is going to go to a friend, you're not going to go to your parents, you're not going to go to a counselor, you're going to go to your friend, then you're going to walk up here by this sign. Go.
One of the things we know from research literature on social support is that people who have close ties with other people generally are better off from a psychological point of view. They are less depressed. Having close friendships, having supportive relationships with others buffers them or protects them against bad outcomes in times of stress. And there's reason to think that adolescence is the time when kids need to practice close relationships with other people.
Sometimes it's hard to solve problems, and you need someone to talk to and tell all your problems to. And we chose friends because usually they can help you solve them, and they'll usually try to be on your side. And parents, sometimes people feel uncomfortable telling all their problems to their parents.
The peer group provides a need or satisfies the needs for belongingness, approval, support, and connectedness. The peer group offers young people the opportunity to try out new behaviors, that they're experimenting with new behaviors, learning to talk to the opposite sex, learning different political views, and so on. The peer group provides feedback, that it provides some comments on how youngsters are doing. So if you don't act according to the rules of the peer group, you get too drunk, you misbehave at a party, and so on, the kids will give you some feedback as to your behavior and also to how you look. The overall goal of social development is to help young people learn the skills that they can get along effectively in relationships.
As adolescents mature, they may enter a stage of cognitive development, which Jean Piaget called formal operations. They develop the ability to think and reason more abstractly.
The bottom number stayed as 1, and the top number became 3 because you multiplied the 2.
The curriculum at the school age level really teaches children, makes the unfamiliar familiar. They're learning all about foreign countries, and they're learning about measurements and concepts and so on. But in adolescence, once they get formal operations, they learn the curriculum then changes, and it makes the familiar unfamiliar. So you go into chemistry and you learn that water isn't water, it's really H2O, you know, and you go to literature and you find that, you know, Gulliver's Travels is really not just a good story, it's an allegory, you know. And in algebra you find that letters just don't represent sounds, they represent numbers. So much of the curriculum then at the high school level really helps young people discover the unfamiliar and the familiar, which is a whole different level of thinking. When young people first discover those abilities, they can be exciting in many ways. I mean, the kids can now marshal arguments, so they start arguing with their parents. And parents say, you're arguing just for the sake of arguing. And that's just exactly right. They are. They're sort of exercising their new mental abilities.
Now, there's one drawback to this creative thinking and advanced logical thinking, and that is you can start to imagine troubles coming and disasters coming and so on, because you can follow a sequence like this. What if I don't get in a good college? Or if I do get in a good college, what if I flunk out? If I don't flunk out, what if I don't get a good job? If I do get a good job, what if I don't get promoted? If I do get promoted, suppose I get a bad wife and I end up in a bad marriage and my kids are bad. And so you can begin to awfulize and think out the future and imagine things that have a low probability of happening, but it gets out of hand. So creative thinking is a mixed blessing. So they may go through a time when not only are they questioning their parents, but they do the opposite of what their parents tell them. Their parents tell them to wear a certain kind of clothes, and then they go wear punk rock clothes, and clothes with holes in them. Their parents tell them to go to school and make good grades, and they barely make C's, and so on. Their parents tell them don't go around with certain kids, and they deliberately then go around with those kids. So they may go through a period of what we call negative identity.
Well, you know, that 80% of the adolescents that experience what we call a normal adolescence still have conflict with their parents, still have to negotiate issues around freedom and independence. And the problems tend to revolve around actually fairly unimportant things in terms of the scheme of things. In fact, most conflicts are around things like clothes and how they spend their money and how much time they spend on the phone. And in fact, we know that while we always talk about the generation gap, that in fact, in terms of real values and morals, most adolescents are more like their parents than they are their peers.
You know, where I cut is no straighter than yours.
I've seen, you know, teachers and parents make mistakes, you know, and it's like they're humans just like everyone else, and I don't really, you know, see the viewpoint that I should be considered less important than them because I'm younger, or, you know, I should have less freedom or responsibility because, you know, they make mistakes just like everyone else.
The research has shown that those adolescents who question their parents' values, who question what they've been taught, are more likely in the long run to be able to develop a serious, strong commitment to them, that questioning is actually healthy.
So I think that there is a period of rebellion, and then there's a period where they integrate the best of their own world plus the best of their parents' world.
One of the most important goals of adolescence is the development of moral reasoning and moral behavior. During this time, adolescents struggle with issues of honesty, integrity, and responsibility toward others.
In terms of moral development, it's Kohlberg's thinking and the thinking of other people that it's moral reasoning that changes with age. That because children's thinking changes and becomes more sophisticated, so does their reasoning. So small children or pre-adolescents may be concerned about right behavior in terms of concrete things. If you break the rules, you'll be spanked. Adolescents more concerned about what their peers think. And finally, at the last stage of moral development, the reasoning has to do with abstract concepts such as truth and justice. So you move along that scale as you age.
I think moral development of children is essential concern that parents have. They really want their children to grow up to be morally competent and autonomous. It's very difficult in a family context, because in a family context you have parents who are the authorities, and sometimes it's easier to be an authority to assert one's power than it is to allow the child to express his or her own thinking.
Now she's pregnant?
Why didn't you tell us first, before going to the doctor?
I was scared out and I didn't want to know.
Well, I mean, something has to be done. What did the doctor say? Are we just going to take you down and just have the baby removed, right? To have the abortion. You're just so early in stage.
I don't want to have an abortion.
What do you mean you don't? How are you going to raise a kid? Are we going to have another mouth to feed or what?
Educators today are trying to incorporate both Freud's thinking and Kohlberg's thinking in what they call values clarification. And in values clarification, the children are not told what to believe, but given a chance to sort out their thinking. For example, they'll give them what they call a moral dilemma.
Here's the story. Judy was a 13-year-old girl. Her mother promised her that she could go to a special rock concert coming to their town if she earned the money to buy a ticket. Judy managed to save up the money the ticket cost, but then her mother changed her mind and told Judy that she had to spend her money on new clothes for school. Judy was disappointed, and she decided to go to the concert anyway. She bought the ticket and told her mother that she hadn't saved enough money for new clothes, only a couple of dollars. So that Saturday, she went to the concert, but told her mother that she was at a friend's house. Her mother never found out what she did. Now, I'm wondering, Tim, what you think the problem in this story is?
Well, I think the problem was that Judy's mom decided not to let her go after she saved up the money.
Well, why do you think that's a problem?
Because Judy's mother broke her promise.
Well, there's two problems. One, that the mother broke her promise to her daughter, and the other one, that Judy lied to her mother and then didn't tell her about it.
Tim is a couple of years younger than Katie, and we still see some signs of this concrete exchange notion, what is owed to oneself in a relationship, rather than focusing on the importance of maintaining the relationship itself. Younger people tend to be egocentric, and so making this transition is an important part of the moral reasoning process. You can't adequately solve any moral problem if you only consider your own point of view. The real-life problems that kids face day by day are the ones that are the best vehicles for moral growth.
Will you write down at least 3 other things in our world that really do trouble you, that you're really bothered about or you're really concerned about, that you'd like to help fix?
My main concern is drugs, because it's killing people and it's just like destroying lives, and it's really addictive and it gets a lot of people on it, and it's bad.
The main concern is the population. The streets are getting busier every day and the traffic is horrible and you just can't get around easy.
My main concerns is gangs, because they're the reason for drugs and guns and violence in the streets nowadays.
Well, I'm really concerned about, like, pollution because, like, it's killing Mother Nature and it's killing all the animals and, like, the ocean's getting polluted and, like, sooner or later we'll never have, like, anything to actually, like, nothing will be fresh or anything.
Kids really have a lot of different concerns that they spend time thinking about during this period. They have developed during this time the ability to think abstractly, and they turn that ability out to the world and start to think about an ideal world. And of course at that point they're very naive. They don't have the cynicism and the blasé attitude toward the world that many adults do. They're very enthusiastic, they have a lot of energy, and they formulate ideals, and they want the world to fit those ideals. They want to make the world fit those ideals.
Earth First, that's like the group I'm a part of also. The environmental issues are more important to me than any issues.
I mean, you can't have pessimists saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it, let's just go the course that we're going, and it's not going to affect us in our lifetime, but it will eventually affect, you know, our children.
Because when I see people writing bills about, you know, banning chlorofluorocarbons or making new kinds of transportation developments, or my delegation had a bill about housing. that's really exciting because I see solutions to problems.
Well, this is a time during late adolescence when they're more involved in social movements and in causes. This is a time when they may feel very passionately about things and put a lot of energy into whatever cause or movement it is. And this is an important part of practicing their different roles, practicing who they want to be in life. You know, can they impact the world? What kind of an impact on the world can they have?
Since they've been operating, Field Bay has completely stopped the dumping of sludge by Hyperion and the LA County Department of Sanitation.
The end goal of the moral stage of development is twofold. One is to move people toward concepts of justice, truth, fair play, liberty, and so on as the basis of their moral thinking. The other piece is to help young people as part of the overall identity thing, which incorporates moral development, is to help people discover what has meaning for them. What has personal meaning for me? What are my personal views? And then how am I going to be willing to stand up for those?
While adolescence can be a challenge for both teenagers and adults, for most young people, the passage from childhood to adulthood is exciting and positive.
I don't know. Sometimes I really don't understand why I'm like this at all. And other times I think I have it all worked out, which I probably really don't.
One of the myths of adolescence is that all adolescents experience a lot of turmoil, and we know through the research that that's not true. That in fact only about 20% of adolescents experience the kind of turmoil and chaos that requires any kind of intervention or help. And the majority, the other 80%, have their problems, have their battles with their parents and their difficulties with their friends and go through their ups and downs in terms of self-esteem. But in fact, negotiate adolescence fairly successfully and feel good about that period of their lives.
I have a really good imagination. I hope that I grow up to be brilliant and have a good job, 2 kids, a loving, smart, caring husband.
I feel very optimistic about adolescence. The beauty of all this struggle is that human beings are very strong and resourceful, and most of these kids will land on their feet and go on to be productive adults, no matter what they've been through. But part of this is just a struggle to grow. And when you grow, you have growing pains.
Eat chocolate, you get zits. Eat hamburgers or french fries, you get zits. I mean, it's a pain.